there. Joanna has a sunny day in her location.
We do too. Yep.
We have rain pouring down at the beach. Our last day and it's pouring. So we should have a few more people joining us. It's kind of cool though to have people from Colorado, Joanna, to Togo, West Africa getting ready to join us. And let's see, Texas, Canada with Julie. It's going to be pretty cool when everybody comes in a little bit more. But it's kind of cool seeing the wide range of people. Okay, let's see. So how are you doing up there, Bill?
Doing well. We've got a nice sunny day here too.
Well, I forgot the Oxfords also that were in the church when I was there. So they know my parents. My parents were their pastor when she was growing up.
I saw that.
Beth, yeah.
Pretty neat. Yeah.
So Joanna's all good with sound and cereal. Can we have some? Okay. Tell you what, why don't we start with, I'll get Gary and later Hannah will just introduce themselves, but why don't we start with Bill? Just tell us where you are, kind of a little about yourself so everybody knows who you are.
Okay. Bill Bangham. I'm in Short Pump, Virginia, which is just outside of Richmond. And I don't know, kind of chilling, not doing a whole lot during these times. So matter of fact, most of what I had scheduled for the rest of the year was canceled. So I've got kind of a free year, but working on some personal stuff and doing some writing. That's about it.
Oh, cool. Julie, kind of tell everybody where you are and all.
I'm in Granby, Quebec, in Canada. And today I'm honored to be part of the call because Stanley, Bill, and Gary were my teachers when I did the School of Photography in Kona, Hawaii.
Joanna used to teach out there in Hawaii as well. Let's see, John Walton, tell us about yourself.
John, I'm here in Arlington, Texas, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I work with Lifeline Global Ministries, a prison ministry, do their social media, photography, and that kind of stuff. So just taking a beautiful day, 79 or so degrees right now in the Metroplex, and just getting ready for a nice weekend.
Alan Hood, tell us about yourself. You're muted right now.
I'm in Brownfield, Alberta, and I'm 3.5 hours north of Calgary. I work for Wycliffe Bible Translators as their photo services manager, producing content and looking after our library. So it's distribution. So yeah.
We got two Canadians here. Michael Hutchison, tell us about yourself and where you're located.
Hi, Mike Hutchinson. I'm in Pasadena, California. 15 years within nonprofit creative departments and some agencies out here. Currently, I'm contracting with fellow storytellers like yourself. And more info can be found at mikehutch.com. Thank you.
Jeff Raymond, introduce yourself up there.
Up here in Pennsylvania, I serve with the ABWE Mission Board. I do mission storytelling around the world, and Director of Visual Communications here.
And Greg Thompson in Marietta, I guess.
Yeah, I'm in Marietta, outside of Atlanta. Recently retired from my corporate job, and now work with some different nonprofits and do all aspects of storytelling, production, photos, writing, etc.
Joanna, you're muted, but go ahead and tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Joanna Pinio, and I'm a photographer. I'm still a photographer, which is good. And right now, like Bill, most of what I was going to do this year was canceled so far. But I'm putting together some teaching materials, and I hope to move more into that direction. I did have a nice teaching thing this summer in New York, which went away unfortunately, but you know, it's all good. We're happy, healthy in Colorado. And right now we're up at we have a house on the western slope as well, my husband's family. So it's kind of a more remote, and it's nice, quiet up here. So, good to see everybody.
Good to see you. What's really neat is we have finally more women on here. It's getting finally, we're still not, well, they should be dominating more, but we only have 4, I think, today. But this is great. So Allison, introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Allison Basie, and I am in Columbus, Ohio, and I did photography and video for ABWE as a missionary in South America.
And let's see, Phil Wallace. I guess that's what PW. I don't have a video or sound on you.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just starting to unload vehicle from a shoot we did yesterday on location. So I've got carts and gear and stuff spread all over the place. I am up in Chicagoland. I work for Awana Clubs International as the solutions media person and director of studios.
Good to have you. So to give enough time to each of the people, we lost Joanna there for a second. I guess oh no, she's there. I was going, the main format that I've been realizing works really well for everyone is, I think, I didn't get Gibbs to introduce himself. Gibbs.
I pop in late. I'm Gibbs Frazier. I'm from Alpharetta, Georgia. I'm a freelance photographer, semi-retired. Do some personal projects and a few projects for hire still.
Robin Rain joined us. That's pretty cool. Robin, say hello to everyone.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, you can. Hallelujah. I finally got here. I'm finally not working today. So, cool. I'm Robin. I hang out with Stanley every now and then in Atlanta. And I will never retire because I got too much to do.
Thanks for joining us. I think I've got everybody on the call, and we may end up with 1 or 2 joining us later. So the basic format that that I set up, I was trying to figure what's a good way to get people just to get to know each other. But since we're all isolated, we all like to see good visuals and be inspired and maybe get ideas from each other and go, hey, I can go do that, or do something that maybe spawn some idea. I find most of us would probably benefit from practicing also pitching and talking to other people about what we do best. And the largest problem most of us folk fall in, if you're a visual person, is we're really good with visuals, but not necessarily good with words. And so hopefully this gives each person, I'm trying to get everybody who's on this to give a chance, 5 to 10 minutes to share whatever you want to. So it's not long enough for a TED Talk. It's not enough time to tell us your life history. So don't do that. It takes forever. But it is a good time to kind of share a concept and basically help us to get to know you a little bit better, so that we all feel like we're part of a larger community. We're not just seeing your photos, but we're getting to know the person behind the camera. So to get to know the person behind the other 6 inches behind that camera, we'll start with Gary Chapman and let him take over the screen and whatever he wants to share.
Sure. Let me hit screen share here. Is that good? Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. I guess, you know, when people ask me what kind of photography I do, if I had to really boil it down, like you were talking about, it would be to create compelling moments, whether that be for commercial, editorial, or nonprofit. So that's really how I market myself, is that I create moments, or I capture them, not create, I capture moments. Sorry, I didn't mean to use the word create there. Capture moments, for these different kind of clients. And just earlier this week, I had a podcast interview, and they asked me, says, well, if you could do anything, if you could create one picture, or if you could create a picture during this COVID situation, what would it be? And I started thinking about it and realized that I don't really want to create a picture. I want to follow stories and let the pictures present themselves. So I started thinking about what I'd want to do, and what I'd want to do would be to go back and either redo and add to some stories I've done, or just go more in depth. So I just wanted to show you a few stories and why I would like to redo them. So this picture here is actually Olivia. She's a midwife nurse in Ghana, and she's delivered 1,600 babies without electricity or running water, and not a single one of them has died. I only had, it was less than 24 hours. I'm guessing, got there late in the afternoon, left the next day. So close to 24 hours. But so at 5 a.m. we got the call that somebody had come in to give birth. So ran to the place where she was, the midwife works, and actually got to witness the birth, which was amazing. And then the interesting thing about this baby was the mother came in the morning, and this is about a picture I missed. I missed the picture in the afternoon of this mother leaving on the back of a motorcycle with her newborn baby that had just been born like 8 hours earlier. That's the picture I missed. But it's heroes like this, like Olivia, that here she's actually training a new midwife, a male midwife, and train that. But I would like to go back and cover these stories again and get more pictures, because sometimes, one day or less than a day is just not enough. But I'd really like to do more heroes like that. This is Pastor Nando in India. And you'll notice on every story that I do, pretty much, I always try to do a portrait. I either do it at the very beginning just to kind of break the ice, or sometimes I do it at the end after I've got to know the person. It just depends on how we're getting along. But this is Pastor Nando. He has taken in over 90 children that are either deaf or they are blind. And he has taken them in and is trying to give them education. This is one of the blind children in the home, just walking on. I saw him walk over to the wall and walk himself down until he could feel the opening and the heat of the sun there in the bathroom. This is Pastor Nando on the left, and also with one of his blind teachers who himself is blind. They're just having like music class there. This is one of the classes for the deaf children. They are standing on their desk and doing their yoga exercises in the afternoon just to break up the class time. So this room is their class, these are their desks, and these are also their beds. And this is Sunita, who, if you happen to notice, you probably can't see it, but right there, she has tattooed her name on her arm, so that worked really well for remembering who it was. But she's feeding these orphans and street children, and I followed her down the entire line of children, and the cross you see on her arm was going in and out as she moved down. I had to keep timing my picture taking until the cross crossed right into her arm so it would show up. This is just a class for the deaf. But this is another one of those heroes. There's short stories that I would love to redo. Even though, having done this story, the nonprofit raised enough money to actually build a new house or a new home for these orphans. So that was a good result of this story. This is one story that I don't know whether I'll ever get to be able to add any more to or not. Situations, but it was, I've made 5 trips to Pakistan, and this was a story on the persecuted believers, persecuted Christians in Pakistan. And I had to photograph each of these people so that they could not be identified. Like this was a man that had been falsely accused of desecrating the Quran, and he was in hiding when I photographed him here and got his story. And just a few days after this, he got arrested and spent 1.5 years in jail. This is just a matriarch, wanted to get her story of generations of Christians in her family. These are church members that rent guns on Sunday to protect their church meetings. Just a young boy, even declaring his Christian faith, even though it's dangerous to do so. This is a pastor in front of the largest mosque in Pakistan. This is a brick maker, 75 years old, who's required to make 1,000 bricks a day for less than $3 a day. This is a mother in the same brick making factory. She has to care for her children as she makes her 1,000 bricks during the day. One of the other jobs that Christians can get in Pakistan is a street sweeper or garbage collector. This particular was an orphan in the city of Abbottabad, and if that sounds familiar, it's because that's the city where Osama bin Laden was found. And according to intel, I drove right past the house where Osama bin Laden was at the time. This is a man surveying his house and was just destroyed by Islamic radicals. A whole village was actually destroyed, or most of a whole village was burned, and some people were killed too. This is one of the men and his malnourished baby with his destroyed house. In the background is the bricks of his house. And these are a pastor holding the burned remains of the Bibles from the church, his church that was burned. But anyway, this particular story, I would love to go back. So it's an ongoing story, and I have FaceTime calls with pastors there quite often, probably once every couple of months. So there's still a lot going on, and the story would be, I would really love to follow it more. And then my main love is India and photographing in India. Over the past 10 years, I've been, I think, 15 times. In fact, my last trip that I got back from right before COVID on March 3rd was India. A lot of the stories I cover there for different clients are faith-based. This is a baptism. This is on Easter. Celebration of families. This is a slum church. It's made out of plastic bags and discarded wood. And this one, I got to this small church that had been ravaged by persecution and attacks. And I wanted to do the story on this church. But when we got there, the church service was already going on. And it was just so packed. For any of you who've been to those churches in India, it was so packed. I couldn't get in there. So I was wondering, how in the world am I going to photograph this? And then I turned around and saw this mirror on the opposite wall reflecting this little girl, and then also the women's side of the room that was framed. So that was the main picture they used for that story. The other pictures I pretty much had to put in a 12 to 24 millimeter lens and just kind of hold it into the room to get any pictures at all. This is a pastor praying for a woman at a leper colony. They have quite a rough life in India, but the pastors make frequent visits in their churches to support them any way they can. This was for Christianity Today. Christianity Today did a story on Christianity in India, and we got to travel all over the country and every kind of imaginable church there, from the village churches to the huge mega churches in India, just to see the difference of faith there. Do a lot of stories on children, orphans again. This is the jungle area of India. Of course, trying to bring in clean water. We're all going to school in the morning. This was for Tom Shoes, so I did some commercial work there. This was at a school that just received the Tom Shoes. This is a girl in India that would do a lot of medical stories. She'd been an outcast in her village because she was a cleft palate. But after she had her cleft palate and lip restored, her village accepted her, and it was a wonderfully positive story. Orphans, more orphan stories. And I think that's, oh, no, I got more. This is microfinancing. Stories are always wonderful stories to cover. Medical. This is on, the lady on the right is a kind of like the Mother Teresa in India that helps with women in brothels. Here she's talking to the woman's daughter, talking to the woman's father and really warning him, don't put this girl in a brothel. And this is a girl that was rescued from a brothel. And this is just I just end with this picture here. This is a friend that I saw many, many times in India, almost every time I went back, and found out on this last trip that he had passed away, which is kind of sad, but always got good pictures of him. What a face, what a character. But that's the beauty of going back again and again and again to the same countries and places, that you can get more in depth. And I hope to go back to get even more in depth. Well, that's it.
Thank you. Anybody got questions for Gary?
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, I got to send someone else.
Yeah, I have a question, but I have to wait here. Do you use supplementary lighting, Gary, when you take your photos, or you typically try to use what natural light is there? How do you handle your lighting?
I haven't taken lights overseas now in probably, I don't know, last 10 trips. I've just decided I wanted to do the other kind. Now, if I had an assignment that was going to include portraiture, I would take a light, but other than that, no.
Okay.
Gary, I have
Yes.
a question. When you do some of these stories, especially ones involving like persecuted people, this sort of thing, and even in orphanages or refugee camps, when you come home, how do you process those experiences of coming back into a consumerism culture, and as a Christian, how do you process that? I know you go in as an objective observer.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And during my younger years of doing this, I would come home and just be really mad at everybody for having 2 cars and having nice houses and having 3 meals a day. I just would be kind of self-righteous mad or whatever. But as it is now, I process most of this when I come home through prayer. And I also have a prayer list where I actually go through the pictures. My prayer list is my pictures where I pray for these people. So that's how I process.
Hey, Gary.
Yeah, Gibbs.
This is really a broad question. I can hear Gary Chapman's responding to me, what do you mean? But can you just walk us through briefly what your preparation process is before a trip?
Well, several things. Gear-wise, I have a master list that I used, and I check off every piece that I'm going to take, and it just reminds me what I might need to take for each trip. So I have a gear list. I, of course, go through all the government regulations, looking for visas, whatever, and then I just research the country as much as I can, looking at photos that have been taken there. I mean, I don't know much other than that, just a lot of research. Yeah. I don't go in with a lot of pre-planned ideas for stories necessarily, because things, for those of you that have traveled, and you know this, Gibbs, that things change so much on these kind of stories. So you have to be so quick to adapt and come up with story ideas as you go almost.
Gary, I've got a question.
Yes, Bill.
How do you relate to your clients and the usage of your images? Do you get a lot of input on that, or not?
I get very little to no input from most clients. I mean, I think that's the great disadvantage
Yeah.
of this kind of work. And sometimes I don't even necessarily agree with how the images are used, especially some nonprofits will use pictures and it's almost more like a window dressing. I don't think, it's not the majority of nonprofits that I've worked with, but some have used it more as window dressing as opposed to the story that I was trying to capture and talk about.
Yeah, more of an art element than.
More of an art element, yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, and I think that's a matter of education, especially for the smaller nonprofits. You need to educate them on that's not the best way. I mean, it's not necessarily ethical either, or even kind to people to do that. But yeah, so it's a matter of education.
Mm-hmm.
How do you have that conversation with a client once they've misused it? Let's say, can you walk us through that conversation? And then the second question has
I don't think I've ever directly corrected a client, because for one thing, it hasn't been that bad of usage. I mean, these are just things I will say, I wish it hadn't been used like that more. But what I do is I will say, hey, please look at the captions that I've put in the metadata. That gives at least the person's first name and some information about them. And you might consider using this, or hey, I can write a blog post for you, or a social media post if you prefer. So that it's never been so bad that I was just like, wanted to cut them out or anything. It's just, simple education little by little, hopefully in a graceful manner so I don't lose them as a client. But yeah.
Have you ever had people in another country like India who try to maybe not accuse you, but think that you're using these pictures to raise money and make money and this kind of thing, and have issues with that?
No, because I don't really do street photography per se. I mean, everything that I've done is pretty much, okay, they know why we're here. It's explained when you get to a church or whatever, they're here to photograph, the worship or the hospital or whatever, in a way that will help this organization raise more funds to help more people like you, whatever. So I've never had a problem with that personally.
A related question then, when you work with a client and you go to a place, do they set the schedule or do you set the schedule, and do you get in situations where you feel like you just don't have enough time, there's just too rushed to get what you need?
Yeah, I think it's almost every trip, it's almost too rushed, for sure. I think every photographer feels that, especially if there's a videographer component or a writer component, because then you're talking about possibly going in 3 divergent directions there and 3 different needs. Each one needs something different. So so that's difficult. And I mean, it's all a matter of, it's compromise. You do the best you can in whichever. You support the videographer if you're not the one doing that video yourself. You support the writer if you're not doing that yourself, because you want to work together to tell the story in the best way possible. But yeah, it's almost always never enough time. That's why I want to go back.
Any other
Gary,
questions?
I've got a question, mainly towards like when you're in a sensitive country, a country where security is definitely at the forefront of everyone's mind. How do you deal with both your subjects' safety and your own? Either whether that's traveling.
And yeah, I missed the last part. He's after travel.
Post with like identity.
Okay.
How do you deal with as you're traveling, as you're dealing with safety and security for yourself as well as your subjects, and as you travel the location, and then afterwards in post, you're saying that you're putting metadata in of some of the people's names and whatnot. How do you deal with that side of the security and whatnot?
That's an excellent question. Actually, if it's a sensitive subject, I don't put the metadata in at all. I strip all the metadata out if it is a sensitive place. And if it is a sensitive place, I make sure that people understand what's happening, you know, what we're doing. And most of the time, Pakistan, I don't know that I really photographed much there without, that would give away identity for something that's sensitive. For other ones like India, where it's sensitive, but not as sensitive as Pakistan, I just make sure the subjects understand what we're doing and make sure they agree with it. And as far as myself, in Pakistan, traveled super, super light, traveled in vans with windows drawn, curtains drawn on the van, and dressed in Pakistani clothes, grew a very, very long beard. And from 150 yards away, I looked Pakistani from 150 yards away. That being said, there were several times in Pakistan that were very touchy. In fact, one time we had to go hide out in a safe house at the US Embassy. Another time, that little girl in Abbottabad, the orphanage she was in there was burned down a week after we left. Now, whether that was because we visited there, we don't know. The owner never found out or could figure it out. But that, it's a definite concern that our presence there caused that orphanage to be burned down by arsonists. So, yeah, it's tough.
Gary, hi.
Hi, Joanna.
Good to see you. One thing I'd like to do, this is something I've been thinking about for quite a while, is to work with nonprofits and help them to move their storytelling to be using the pictures the way that you're talking about, and to help them understand how to better use them. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
How to better use their pictures? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, just helping nonprofits to work through use of the pictures, using them for more ethical marketing. There's an interesting website about ethical storytelling for nonprofits, right, which I think was really great.
Yeah, it is, and then I always actually several people have actually directed that website, Ethical Storytelling, to them just so they can understand more. But then, I think it's usually when I'm talking with the people on site, when we're in the field together, and which hopefully it happens a lot of the times, and I can actually talk to them about, hey, how this could be used, or be careful how this is used. So it's more that personal one-on-one thing. I don't know any other way to do it other than that. Now, the hard thing is that people change over positions in nonprofits so quickly sometimes that it seems like a never-ending battle to educate. Right.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when Ripple Effect Images does some work, with nonprofits as it connects with girls and women, and Annie has kind of a really, when she, of course, I'm not with Ripple now, but Ripple is sort of gifting this trip. They've sort of vetted the nonprofit, and they're gifting a video and a still coverage to the nonprofit funds that Annie has raised through Ripple. And she's very clear about, we're not going to run all over the place. We want to cover as much as possible, but we also want to focus in. And she does a lot of education talking about storytelling. And since it's kind of a gift, they listen.
Right.
But it's tough. I just was wondering I appreciate your thoughts on that. So, yeah. Thanks.
Does anybody else have comments? Not necessarily always questions too. Anybody else on some of these topics that have been brought up? Anybody can help us? It seems like, Gary, how much of your personal projects have you done that have helped you show nonprofits how to use your work better? Meaning, it may be not a shot, but the way you're posting them or other things. Have you tried to show them how to use this stuff better?
I
By
have.
just doing.
Yeah, and I've also written sample blogs for people or sample captions for social media and sent them out and said, hey, what about doing it this way? And then that has actually turned into pay later too, when some people have hired me to actually do that kind of work for them also. But it had to be more the education first, just kind of presenting it. Hey, what about think about it this way, use it this way.
How much does Vivian help you with the writing or the editing? Because you seem to have a gift that many of us don't have. I mean, there's some people here that are writers, but editing your own writing is different than having an in-house editor. Can you tell us about your relationship with Vivian and how that works?
I should have brought her up here. I always tell people if they get an email from me, it was probably written mostly, or at least edited by Vivian, because she taught me during the early days of writing that be warm, Gary, be warm. Because I just would answer an email with yes, no, whatever. But as far as the writing for the blogs and whatever, yes, that all goes through Vivian. She's a great writer and great editor. I wouldn't dare write anything on myself without it being edited. It just, same way with photos. I mean, she looks through the photos too. So yeah, it helps to have that other pair of eyes, another brain.
So is she harder on you than you on yourself?
Oh yeah. So, I mean, we've been married a long time, but there have been times when it was tested over, I like this photo, she doesn't like this photo, it's kind of a thing. But yeah, no, she's really good though. I've grown to trust her more and more.
Well, let us switch over to Hannah Strayer. I don't know how, thank you, Gary. Hannah is joining us from Togo, West Africa. So different time zone. It's almost, what do you call, dinner time there? Getting close to. So go ahead and take us and share your screen or whatever you want to do.
All right, let me find all my little tabs here quick. See if I'm at where I need to be. Okay. All right, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay. So like Stanley said, my name is Hannah Strayer. I'm joining you from Togo, West Africa today. I am kind of fresh to the game. I'm pretty new to everything, so still in a huge learning curve myself. But it started in 2015. It was kind of my launch pad into media. So I am a full-time missionary with ABWE International. Actually, Jeff Raymond, who introduced himself earlier, was kind of one of my first contacts with understanding how media can be used on the mission field. And so I did Storytellers Abroad workshops with Jeff, and that's actually how I know Stanley. And this trip to Romania being my first trip, it's kind of funny to me because it's the launch pad for my ministry, but usually when people tell you like, oh yeah, and this was the moment when like everything made sense and it clicked, it's usually like this big success story. Like, oh yeah, and I did this and then this happened and it was all awesome and everything's like gold and ribbons and rainbows. And this was kind of the opposite of that. This story that I went into as a naturally talented writer and more focused on photography. And so when I got here and didn't really know a whole lot about videography and am real fresh to knowing what it is to pursue a story, I remember sitting down and Stanley looking at my video at one point and being like, no, that's not the direction you want to go. This isn't what we're looking for. You're trying to tell the story, but you're going off in this direction instead of going this way. And I'm sitting there the whole time thinking, why did I even come on this trip? Because clearly none of this is working out. But so seeing the end result of watching people connect with this video as my hero of the story really got to tell her story and explain where she came from was when I knew, like, this is what God's been preparing me to do the last 7 years of my life. So I told the story of Juana, which is the lady on the left here in blue. She is a former prostitute who was ministered to by Letizia, who's the lady next to her on the couch. And the organization that Letizia founded in Romania is called FREE. It's a Romanian acronym, but in English it translates to Women Redeemed and Set Free. And so they're an anti-trafficking, anti-prostitution organization. And so Juana's heart desire now, being rescued out of prostitution and coming to saving knowledge in Christ, is that she wants to work with other women and other prostitutes, like similarly this lady also is named Juana, different one, but who are working the streets because they don't know of any other way that they can support their families. And so just being able to communicate Juana's story of hope and see how that impacted other people is really where my desire to use media and missions came from. And so this is just a Bible study that Juana is a part of. So this lady is also a current prostitute, and so they come and they do a Bible study each week, just trying to get the women to get to know them and get to know the truth of the gospel. So in late 2016, I ended up going on a trip to Togo because I had been selected as appointed as a missionary with ABWE. And so this was part of my survey trip, but then also Storytellers was doing a Storytellers trip there. And so I kind of built both in, and I told Abra's story. And Abra is Boniface's wife, and he's a pastor of a church. And at the time, they were taking care of 11 children, 3 of which were their own, 8 of which were brought to them by people in the community. And they said, you know, we can't take care of our kids, can you? And they said, well, we can't just say no, like where else is the kid gonna go? But as much as they love children, Abra's heart is studying the Bible and getting to know the depths of it so that she can minister to other women and pastors' wives particularly. And she said, my dream is that I can teach others, will teach others, who will teach others until the farthest parts of Togo can be reached with the gospel. And so her story, when I got to share that, was so encouraging because she was focused so much on not just reaching her own central community, but being able to see that that expounded and multiplied more and more and more. And these are just some of the women that were in a village where she teaches every Sunday. And they come and they bring the benches on their heads and they set the benches down, and all the ladies sit with their babies or their grandbabies and listen. And Abra just uses a simple coloring book and a Bible to teach them about the truth of God's word. So in 2016, at the end of that year, when I came back after going on several of the Storytellers trips and trying to hone my skills a little bit better, one of the ways I kind of jumped in to practice on my own without instructors with me was there's an organization called Global Partners in Peace and Development that's based out of Virginia, and they work in India with a local partner. And one of the big things that they do in their ministry is that they build clean water wells in villages. And so one lady named Dana had this vision that she was going to run in this marathon to clean water wells by raising $100 for every mile, so that one marathon completed would equal one water well in India. And so the Harrisburg Marathon in Pennsylvania actually allows you to run in relays, 4-team relays. And so she got together, her goal was to have 3 teams and dig 3 water wells. And the way that the Lord worked through that first marathon was that he allowed them to have 4 teams. And by the time the funds came in, he dug 9 water wells. And so they were hoping to promote for the next year and said, you know, it would be great if we could have something that would communicate this story of how God worked through this team to reach India. And I said, well, I'd love to be able to help put this story together. Let's promote it together. And so I sat down with one of their associates in Pennsylvania and with Dana, and came the point where we found the story and promoted it. And actually the director of marathon itself found out that their team was running and that they had this resource available and shared it to the thousands of people that they have that receive the marathon newsletter. So just to see the scale a piece of media, a short 4-minute video could have, and the next year they ended up getting 100 runners and digging over 30 water wells in India. So it was just really awesome to see a whole community kind of rally around that and say, here's something that we can easily do, let's do this, and it came by just a short share of a story. So these are some of the people in India then that benefited from clean water wells, just these women and children who were just constantly following the team around and thanking us. You know, we brought clean water to a village that didn't have any before, and so they could avoid health risks of having the dirty water and things like that. And this man is taking his first drink of clean water ever in his life. So just being able to walk around and kind of photograph these moments and capture these moments and share them with people, have that impact has been really exciting and interesting and powerful for me. So that's it for the picture slideshow of it now. Right now, as I did say, I am in Togo, West Africa. I didn't pull any of the pictures into the slideshow because it's been kind of a crazy week, so I didn't have a ton of days to be able to pull anything out. But one of the goals that I am trying to most convey is when I convey these stories is capturing the personality of somebody. And I think a lot of us can relate to that, is not just taking an image to make it look great, but taking it to find the person in it so that their story can also be more easily told by that picture. So yeah, that's kind of it for me. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And then if you guys have questions and stuff, I'll be happy to answer them as best I can.
You had mentioned that the picture of the man having his first drink of clean water, that just really hit me broadside. It's like, wow, we take that for granted every day. So what were they drinking prior to those wells?
Yeah, in a lot of these villages, the people have to walk easily 1 mile to 1.5 miles each way to find a stream or something else. Oftentimes that's, you know, streams are going to be dirty anyway, but in many of the places the streams are, you know, riddled with the sewage of animals and other people. And so we're walking miles to find a water source that they could use. And some of the craziest parts of even that is that in a lot of those villages, the reason that they're getting a clean water well isn't necessarily because there isn't clean water in the village. It's because it's in a well that they're not allowed to use because they're of the wrong caste. So in some of the villages that we find, they're dug there because these people are of a lower class, and even though the caste system is no longer legal, it's still very socially operative. And so in that particular village, there was a water well like just close by to where we were, but those people weren't allowed to use it because they weren't socially acceptable enough.
I've got a question. What are some of the challenges you have working in a country like Togo in terms of resources and yeah, we're used to having fast internet. You know, we have everything we need. How about you? What's it like?
Yeah, it creates a gamut of troubles. Certainly one thing that you think about is if you're taking lighting anywhere or anything that you really have to plug in, sometimes you have to be thinking ahead of where you're going. A lot of your villages aren't going to have any form of electricity. So if the lighting is poor inside their house, your option is to go outside of their house and try and find something else to do, because if you can't take those lights and add into it, then you're faced with that. Some of it that's complicated is depending on where you're at, the audio can be really difficult. Have chickens or other animals that are just kind of walking all around, and so you're picking up all of these like chirps and, you know, goats bleating and all that kind of stuff. So you just get a whole bunch of different variety of noises that you're like, oh, okay, wait, can you stop talking a second? Because there's somebody, you know, running a tractor or somebody driving by in a giant truck or whatever. And then one big thing I think here, I I'm constantly like battling with is lighting composition in most places. A lot of your buildings inside have aerated block walls, and so the light comes in fairly nicely. But when you're exposing for African skin, which oftentimes is a very dark black, and you're trying to get that light, you kind of have to try and figure out how to compensate, get the light on the person, but not to blow out here and not to be too dark. And so sometimes the lighting balance is one of the really complicating parts too.
Okay, thanks. Do you do mostly video? Do you do some stills as well, or?
I would say I am primarily stills. I am most comfortable with stills. I've been working on getting more into video. I am technically Africa media specialist, so I do kind of the wide gamut of everything. Video is definitely something that I'm still in a major learning curve with, but I try as much as possible to use it where I can and when it's most effective. I would definitely say I am still a photographer by nature.
Can you tell everybody where you're living, what they're doing at the campus part where your house is, and then what else they're doing in Togo, why they put you in Togo?
Sure. So I live in Togo, West Africa, but technically my vision focus for ministry is West Africa, where we have active missionaries. So that includes also Ghana and Gambia. So I live in Togo on a compound. Part of the reason I live here is because the team is larger, and in terms of being a single female who would have to travel fairly often in the ways that we've planned it, this is one of the safest places to keep my gear in downtimes, but also to have me have the largest team that I can effectively support while I'm not traveling. So I am creating media resources to be able to help the ministries communicate with their partners back in the States. And a lot of what that looks like is sharing stories so that they could share them with individual partners or with churches. And so I live at the Village of Light School for the Blind. So right now our schools are currently still closed because of lockdown. That live here on campus with us. They come from all over Togo, so they can come from as far as about 8 hours away down here to study because there aren't a lot of quality blind schools. If you have a disability, Togo is a culture that kind of shuns you or put you in the background because you're not really seen as useful. Your life doesn't have a whole lot of value, and so the school was started so that there was a safe haven for blind students to come. And so we have classes from, I believe it's kindergarten until 6th grade. The system's a little bit different here, but it's right around 6th grade. And then we have a 2-year workshop, which basically teaches blind students a trade. And so a lot of them actually, they weave chairs, and I can show you because I'm sitting on one. They weave these chairs like this, and they do benches and tables and swings and all kinds of things. So that's one of the skills that they learn among soap making. They make talcum powder and chalk and some other things. So some of the other ministries that we have 2 hospitals that operate here in Togo. We have an aviation ministry. There are Christian schools that are run throughout the country. There's a radio ministry that we've got. We have a center that does Christian resource materials that the Togolese can come in and buy for churches or Bible studies. We have a Bible Institute. There's a whole bunch more actually that are represented that I know I'm missing, but there's quite a few ministries. So I'm sort of a support role to help communicate the stories of things that are happening in there, especially when they have needs.
When you're doing a video interview, for instance, how do you deal with things like translation of other languages? How do you deal with the language issue in your stories?
That creates a unique twist to it sometimes. I do speak French. I'm not fluent, but I did study, so I speak some French, so that does help. The trade language here is French, so quite a few will at least know enough to get by. But when they start speaking the tribal languages, or if they're more comfortable in tribal languages, I then have to find somebody who knows that tribal language and is comfortable translating back and forth with me. So it elongates the process a little bit, and sometimes it's tricky. Stanley was here in November, and we had one lady that we were trying to get to like state her story, and we sat with her for about 3 hours, and it came out to about 14 seconds of footage. Part of it was we were trying to get her to explain what was happening by translating to a guy she spoke Ewe, and so he wasn't understanding what we were trying to tell him in French or in English, so I had to switch over to French so that then he could switch over to Ewe so they could speak back. So it became this big domino effect of trying to figure it all out. So it's definitely a process, and it's complicated, but it's manageable.
I had to laugh a minute ago, Stanley, when you jumped in with the question that I was going to ask her about where she's living, but that's probably because I think the two of us think alike, done too many trips together or something. But yeah, Hannah, I appreciate how you shared, some of your background. How do you, we like to share all of our shiny stuff and our glory moments, and that journey that the Lord took you on to get you there, the water wells, and here you're at a place that's using blind training as well as aquaponics as a way to meet a need, not just for humanitarian work, but to introduce people to the gospel. And Hannah's really good at relating those stories. I'd encourage you guys to check out her Instagram stories. There's a lot of strong work on there, but Togo is one of our largest fields, and strategically it's a great place to have you located, and so it's kind of neat to see you share how you got to that point.
I was curious to find out how COVID's limited your movement and your ability to access stories in that part of the world. How has it been going in Togo?
Yeah, it's been a little bit different. They actually just lifted some restrictions, which has helped with some things. We have been under, I wouldn't say super strict lockdown, but it's definitely affected pretty much all of our ministries. There have been a lot, mostly the influx of airplanes coming in. Our hospitals rely very largely on our short-term medical missionaries to be able to come in and provide relief for our in-house medical providers. And so right now we have 2 surgeons who have been working pretty much 24/7 for the last 2.5 months. The same for our other doctors. I think we have 1 OBGYN right now and a family doctor. And so then we have 1 like short term that came before COVID and actually are getting ready to leave. And so it's been stressful for a lot of our ministries, just very taxing because a lot of the short-termers that we rely on. For me specifically, it's been complicated because the traveling restrictions meant that we couldn't leave our city. Where I live is actually 40 minutes from our hospital. And our hospital right now that's there is one of our biggest ministry projects. They're in the middle of a major overhaul, renovation, and expansion. And so it's been hard because I haven't been able to get up there. I haven't been able to shoot. I haven't been able to do any video, any photo. I haven't been able to do really any like story finding, or if I am, I'm kind of like, hey, have you guys had any stories come in? If so, relay the information to me as best you can. And I'm going to try and do something with it. So I actually just had a guy that shared a story about a man who had a flesh-eating disease in his leg, and they were trying to save his leg. And he was very resistant to the chaplains sharing the gospel with him. And so finally the one chaplain was like, fine, I'm done wasting my time with you. If you want something, you let us know. Here's a Bible, you read it. I'm going to go talk to patients who want me to actually share with them. So they said a couple days later, the guy said, like, I want you to come and talk to me about this. I've been reading my Bible. So he got saved through that. And then he was discharged, and probably, I think they said a week or 2 after he left the hospital, he was killed in a car accident. So I said, this is a powerful story. Like, I want to be able to tell it. As I'm reading it, I was like, wow, I'd like to be able to like interview this guy. And then when they said he died in the car accident, I was like, well, I can't do that. So I can at least share what I've got. And then I said, does anybody have a photo of him? Because he was in the hospital for like a month and nobody picture story, but no visual. So yeah, some of that's been complicated because then I am kind of restricted to my campus and just kind of relying on other people to get information.
Yeah, I was wondering about whether or not, because sometimes if you're stationary, you can actually start to look around at things that are close to you and then try to do that. Like I was thinking about those doctors, just telling a story from the doctor's perspective gives an understanding of the ministry, how it's sticking it out through difficult times, and you can bring that back to your constituents. So, but if you can't get there.
Right.
I think Gary had a really good point a while ago, just this whole idea of ongoing education. You know, that's the challenge we face from missions headquarters point of view, and having people like Hannah there on the ground, seeing, you know, continually smacking them upside the head. You know, we as missionaries tell me, you know, you guys don't think like we think. And I'm like, yeah, I know, I hang out with photographers. They don't think like anybody thinks. But, you know, to have somebody there to, you know, to kind of feed that to him, it's like, really? You never thought to take a picture of this guy laying in the hospital for a month? Oh, well, no, we didn't. So it's hugely advantageous to have somebody there with eyes and ears on the ground.
Maybe a question along that line. Maybe a question along that line for all of you who are working with nonprofits. Do you have people that are now saying, "Oh, teach us how to use our smartphones to take pictures, or teach us how, you know, how to do it and send them to you"? Is that something that you've come across with yourself when you can't go out and get them yourself? Anyone?
I don't think anybody asked that question. I think they already think they're photographers with their phones. And so, and then when you get on Zoom calls and you find all the people who have the light behind their head and the window, no, I don't think people really ask us. They assume they can take a basic picture. Maybe Greg can tell us.
Well, I think you raise an interesting issue, and we can either fight against the wave that's coming at us, or we can figure out how to make the wave work for us. And I think that's where education and relationship and influence comes into play, where you accept the fact that, I mean, right now, I suspect Hannah would love to have a smartphone picture of the guy who was killed. I mean, she has no picture of him. So I think that's where, you know, you accept the fact that everyone has a smartphone, and then you begin building a relationship with them and teaching them some basics of photography. Put the light, you know, on the face, not, you know, silhouette where you can't see any features, or, hey, have you thought about doing it this way or that way? And just that increases your potential raw material for telling these stories, and you're not going to stop the whole smartphone thing. And like Stanley says, people assume they're great photographers. Well, the first thing you should do if you're trying to build a relationship with someone is not say, no, you're not, you're a terrible photographer. You don't want to do that. You want to build them up and create. So I think a big part of it is, look, this is the way it is, guys. And we've got to work with what we've got. And I think there's opportunity here to broaden our reach by teaching some basics to some people and increasing the number of resources available to us to tell the stories. That's just my personal view.
We have a few Hannahs and 1,000 other missionaries that are not Hannah. Tell them a little bit about the project you're working on that goes right along with what Greg was just saying, Hannah.
Yeah, so before I jump into that part, I was going to say, I think I almost find kind of the opposite idea is, and maybe it's just because I'm the media person, so I'm the one that they would complain to about not being good, because they'll say, I'm not going to take any pictures because you're here, so I'll let you take the pictures. So I don't really have people coming to ask me, hey, can you show me how to do this better? I mostly have people defaulting to me to say, you already do it well enough, so I don't have to worry about it. So actually right now I am in the process of working with Jeff, and even Allison has just kind of jumped in with us, and we're trying to work on some various parts of what it looks like to help missionaries to improve their skills. And sort of a set that we're working on right now is how to write more engaging newsletters, but then also looking into, here's a document that gives you a few basic tips on how to video yourself in an update better. So use something as a background if you've got something too distracting or too boring, or if your room is echoey, put some towels on the floor or hang some curtains somewhere, that kind of stuff. So we're actually kind of writing almost like how-to kind of DIY guides that we may even turn into a short video series to be able to help missionaries and other people to say, okay, I have a smartphone. Here are some tips to use it. Don't video like this. Let's video like this, that kind of thing. So just trying to go through some of those basics to help them understand some stuff.
That's absolutely terrific. I think that, you know, and I've gone through every phase you guys have. I mean, my definition of wisdom is accumulated scar tissue, and I've done everything wrong at least once. My goal is to only do it wrong once, and, you know, to try to learn from my mistakes. But I think that's terrific to do that. And I've gone through we can only, you know, when I was a photographer, you know, shooting for AP and everything, well, I'm the only one who's allowed to take that picture because I'm an actual professional photographer. You know, I got over that pretty quick. And then you get over that when you desperately need resources. And just to explain to you, I'll tell you one of my low moments, since Hannah did that as well. I mean, you know, you want quality, and I'm a former news guy, and I should accept that we should take what we got. We had a really bad tornado hit Oklahoma City. I was working for Chick-fil-A at the time, destroyed the area around. There was these terrific stories coming out about how the Chick-fil-A operator was really working in the community. You know, and I'm trying to figure out how to get a video crew there or get Stanley there or do something to get really high quality. And the owner of Chick-fil-A, my boss, Dan Cathy, who he and I had still have a love-hate relationship. We're constantly doing that. Dan said, when he was going through his, everything's cool, I have a smartphone, let's just do smartphone for everything. So, you know, you're kind of constantly going back and forth. And Dan said, no, have the operator do a smartphone video and we'll put that online and that'll be terrific. And I'm like, oh, nice, Dan, you don't understand. It's not going to be professional, yada, yada, yada. Stanley may remember this. And I did it because he was the boss. Well, at the risk, you know, you never want to encourage your boss because it only encourages them to give you more bad ideas. And in this case, he was dead on right. And we did, the operator did this video, literally holding his phone out and everything. Just told the story from the heart. It was not, you know, it was rough. It was everything else, but it was authentic. And it was one of the most powerful pieces we posted. And it just completely like, oh man, I hate being wrong. And I sure hate to be wrong when it's my boss who was right. And, but it opened up my whole eyes to the possibilities. And it just increased the number of resources available to us in such a way. And then of course the quality's gotten better and better. So I didn't want to come across as, particularly to Hannah or any of the younger people, like, oh yeah, you know everything. I don't know everything, but I've got more scars than you do. And I'm older than you are. And I've learned a lot of this the hard way. So that was one of those low moments where the light finally went on for me. And I just share that in trying to be a little bit vulnerable so you guys understand that. I mean, the low moments happen, and the question is, can we learn from them? I struck everyone dumb. I hope that wasn't because it was a really stupid comment.
Nope.
There have been several organizations. I know the Seed Company has done this. Moody Radio, I did some storytelling, smartphone storytelling for them in Ghana and in Bulgaria for a couple of years. So there are several people that are developing resources on teaching others to use mobile devices. Maybe it's time to consolidate some of that stuff and make it available at a broader scale. I don't know.
Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and I'll send out an email later and see if we can get 2 more people for next week to share. Is this working for everybody? Everybody enjoying this?
Yep. Very good.
Thank you, Gary.
Stanley,
and
how's the beach, Stanley?
It's pouring rain right now. We're outside the beach showing you the beach, but it literally is pouring.
All right.
Well, thank you guys for all sharing, and thank you, Gary, for sharing, and Hannah especially. And I'm glad we're able to work across the time zones this time. And I'll send out an email with 2 more people for next week, and hopefully there'll be some new faces that we can have share their work. Any last comments for anybody? be sure you send emails or notes or anything you have to suggest. And thanks, Joanna, for letting us see you again. And Allison never showed us where she is, but thanks for joining us, Allison, as well. Well, thanks,
Sorry,
everybody.
I was on a hotspot. I was just saying I was on a hotspot, so I was trying to conserve the data a bit, which is why I blanked out.
Well, thanks
We're
for
up in
joining
the
us, everybody.
sort of-
Well, I'll send this out for you guys and see you next week. And I'll post this video in case you had to step away for a moment and want to review it. It'll be up online soon.
Thanks, Stanley.
Thanks, guys.
No.